cold billionaire caught his maid dancing at midnight. What happened next is pure insanity. The night was thick with secrets. Dark clouds loomed over the sprawling estate of billionaire Thomas Ashford, a man infamous for his frigid demeanor and shrouded wealth. His mansion, a palace of glass and steel, gleamed under the flashlight beams of the moon, but inside, a pulsating energy danced within its walls. The clock struck midnight. Only whispers could be heard, except for the echoes that began to rise from the grand ballroom, a room sealed tightly against the prying eyes of the world. What could possibly unfold in such a lavish, yet isolated, setting? Amid the shadows, a flicker of movement caught the eye. A slight figure clad in a simple maid's uniform, spinning freely, her movements fluid and euphoric. Her name was Clara, and as the soft notes of a hidden radio caressed the air, she was lost in her own world. Her laughter rang out, alive and unrestrained, filling the silence that usually enveloped the mansion. Outside, the wind howled as if warning her something was about to change. But then, the unmistakable sound made her freeze, a creak echoing through the vast corridor like a death knell. Her heart thudded in her chest. Anxiety twisted her stomach. Shouldn't he be here? Shouldn't he be dancing in the moonlight? The billionaire was notorious for his ruthless sense of control. The thought of being discovered sent a wave of fear through her, yet the thrill of rebellion held her captive. Clara's chest tightened. Just as she began to reconsider her risky venture, the ballroom door swung open. What happened next sent shockwaves through the very foundation of the mansion. Thomas Ashford stood silhouetted in the doorway, his icy gaze piercing through the darkness. Time hung suspended. Was it anger? Shock? Or perhaps a spark of something else? The air thickened with tension, and Clara's breath caught in her throat. Everything felt raw and electric. Could this moment turn into something beautiful, or would chaos reign? Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. In that eye-catching moment, the world outside seemed to vanish, leaving just the two of them in a bubble of unspoken tension. Clara's hands trembled as she fought against the urge to turn and run. She could feel the heat radiating from Thomas, the weight of 1,000 secrets lying between them. The atmosphere crackled with uncertainty. Then, without warning, Thomas stepped forward, breaking the trance. What would he say? Would he unleash his fury or show an unexpected side? The questions pulsated endlessly in Clara's mind as she searched his features for a clue. But then, a slight smile crept onto his lips, sending a chill up her spine. Was it pity or intrigue? Suddenly the billionaire wasn't just a man of cold decisions but one of unfathomable mystery. And as the clock struck again, something in that lavish ballroom shifted. What would come next? Would their lives intertwine, or would this midnight encounter seal their fates forever? Clara's breath hung in the air, a tenuous fog marking her panic as Thomas slowly advanced. Her pulse raced, each beat echoing in her ears. The absurdity of the moment wrapped around her like a blanket. Here she was, a mere maid, caught in the act of dancing in the grand ballroom of a man notorious for his cold ruthlessness. He held all the cards, and every instinct in her screamed to retreat. Yet something within her, an ember of defiance, held her in place. Quite the performance, Thomas murmured, his voice as smooth as silk but with an underlying timbre that sent shivers down her spine. His gaze roamed over her, making her acutely aware of her appearance, her simple attire, and the wildness of her hair. He stepped closer, the space between them charged, a nexus of fear and intrigue that electrified the air. Were you expecting company? Clara swallowed hard, her throat dry. Words fled her, trapped behind an invisible wall of embarrassment and dread. Instead, she managed only a feeble shake of her head. What's a good maid to do when all her duties are done? His slight smirk widened, revealing an amusement that caught her off guard. The tension shifted, a dance in its own right, with each heartbeat its own climactic pulse. Did he find her ridiculous or fascinating? Clara's courage wavered, but an unexpected flicker of mischief sparked within her. What about a billionaire? She shot back, finding her voice despite trembling hands. His eyebrows raised, impressed or at least entertained. Touché. But were you planning to be caught, or was this merely a happy accident? With that, the game was on. Clara crossed her arms defiantly, her heartbeat steadying just a touch. Maybe I was hoping I'd inspire a little bit of fun in this place. Fun. He echoed the word, considering it as if it were a rare gem. Interesting choice for someone who's undoubtedly seen the darker side of this mansion. His words hung heavy, provoking visions of her foggy reflection in the polished floors, memories of lonely nights spent cleaning up after extravagant parties where laughter and luxury drowned out her own silence. Life isn't all that glitters, Clara said, a note of fierceness slipping into her tone. Sometimes you have to find your joy even in the darkest corners. There was a moment, a heartbeat, when his expression shifted, the cold billionaire just a fraction more vulnerable, drawn into her world where laughter had once lived. But the moment fractured. A sudden crash echoed from the hallway, snapping them both back to reality. Clara's heart raced, spurred once more by panic, but this time laced with fresh apprehension. What was that? She stepped back instinctively, her instincts screaming for survival. Stay here, Thomas commanded, his voice hardening, filled with an authority that jolted her. In an instant, the playful atmosphere evaporated, replaced by an urgency that turned the lavish ballroom into a potential crisis zone. As he moved with near-silent grace toward the door, Clara was torn. Should she follow him, stay behind, or flee entirely? Her instincts warred with her curiosity. With a final glance back, Thomas was out the door, leaving her in a lingering silence thick with questions. She could feel that something was deeply off about this place, and her heart raced at the realization that she might be part of something much darker than she anticipated. The door creaked open behind him, and a shadow lingered just past the threshold, unseen yet menacing. What waited beyond could change everything. Clara took a tremulous breath, a seed of fear blooming in her chest. What had she stumbled into? And more importantly, what would happen when Thomas returned? The clock began its relentless ticking once more, but this time it would not signal midnight. It would count down to something immeasurably darker. Clara shifted in the heavy silence, her breath hitching as the echo of Thomas's footsteps faded into the darkened hallway. She could still feel the tension, the electricity from their confrontation zipping through her veins. A part of her wanted to bolt for the door, to escape this gilded cage, but another part, an insatiable curiosity, held her firm. The crash had been loud, too loud for the opulence surrounding her. It echoed like a warning bell bouncing off the walls of her mind. She stepped forward, her heart hammering, peering into the dimness beyond the threshold. The hall stretched before her, dark and foreboding, shadows clinging to corners like whispers from the past. Cautiously, Clara approached the doorway, her footsteps muted on the polished floor as she scanned the corridor. A flickering light beyond caught her eye, drawing her toward the unknown. Was it safe to move? Or was danger lurking just out of sight? Thomas! She breathed, almost choking on his name. Why had she called for him? Was she looking for reassurance, or was it just instinct? But there was no answer, only the soft patter of her heart, and the unnerving squeak of the old floor beneath her. As she dared to step fully into the hallway, the atmosphere thickened, the air heavy with uncertainty. Behind her, the ballroom felt impossibly far away, like memory teasing her to return to safety. But something visceral and unexplainable pulled her onward. Then, another sound shattered the threads of silence. A low, guttural growl repeated in the distance, like a predator sharpening its teeth, and Clara froze, dread pooling in her stomach. It couldn't be. She impatiently brushed a strand of hair behind her ear, straining to hear over the noise of her own heartbeat. Thomas had said to stay behind, but a cold shiver danced down her spine. She had to know what had happened. Summoning her courage, she took a few tentative steps. The hallway felt endless, shadows stretching and yawning as if alive. Every instinct screamed to turn back, but an invisible thread bound her to the unknown danger ahead. As she rounded the corner, the flickering light grew brighter, illuminating a figure in the distance. Thomas emerged from around the bend, his face contorted in a strange mix of anger and fear. "Clara?" he called, and the urgency in his voice was unlike anything she had heard before. "Get back now!" But before she could move, a shadow loomed behind him. A chill crawled up her spine as a figure emerged from the darkness, its features obscured. The growl rose again, sending a wave of pure terror crashing over her. "Behind you!" she screamed, her voice cracking as adrenaline surged. Thomas turned just as the figure lunged, a flash of brutality slicing through the calm veneer. Clara's heart dropped, instinct kicked in, and she ran towards them, fear fueling her. "Thomas!" she yelled, desperation thick in her throat. Without thinking, she hurled a lightweight vase from the nearest table, hoping to distract whatever it was. The porcelain shattered against the wall, drawing the creature's attention. Thomas took advantage, moments of primal strength igniting in him as he stepped back, preparing to fight. In that moment, everything felt surreal, as if time had stretched, predicating the chaos that would surely follow. Clara grasped the edge of the door, wanting to join the fray but also willing to flee. Would she aid Thomas and risk her own safety, or should she retreat and find a way out of this nightmare? The tension thickened as the two figures clashed, leaving Clara's heart sinking as she watched the fight unfold. Reality twisted into a nightmare frame, blurring the lines between loyalty and self-preservation. What had she truly stepped into? Was this Thomas's life, or had she just fallen into the depths of darkness that thrived beneath the mansion's gilded surface? Clara's pulse quickened with every passing second. She had to make a choice. But in this moment of chaos, she realized that her world was irrevocably shifting, and she might never return to the innocent maid dancing in the ballroom again. Just then, the growl intensified, nearly drowning out Thomas's shouts. Clara's heart dropped. What was about to break from the shadows could end everything. Would she align herself with the danger, or would the danger consume her whole? In an instant, chaos erupted. The figure that had lunged at Thomas was far from ordinary. It seemed to blend into the shadows, a grotesque mix of human and something primal. Clara's heart raced, caught in the storm of emotions swirling inside her. Was it fear? Yes. But there was something else, an overwhelming need to protect Thomas, to pull him from the jaws of darkness. "Clara, stay back!" Thomas shouted, his voice strained as he struggled against the creature's hold. Clara clenched her fists, torn between self-preservation and the drive to help him. A scream erupted from her lips as she pushed off the door frame, racing toward them without thinking. She was a maid, she wasn't a fighter. Yet, for him, she could summon the strength of a warrior. With another vase in hand, she hurled it at the creature again. It crashed against its shoulder, and for a split second, its attention diverted from Thomas. But the creature was fast. It pivoted sharply, snarling in Clara's direction, revealing its warped face twisted in fury. Clara stumbled back, the guttural growl scraping against her nerves. She understood then that this was no ordinary animal. This was a reflection of the mansion's hidden heart, a manifestation of the horrors it kept at bay. Thomas seized the moment. "Go back!" he yelled again, fierceness in his eyes despite the fear lurking beneath. He lunged at the creature, grappling with it fiercely. But it was like wrestling with smoke. Its form seemed to flicker, shifting just out of his grasp. Clara's mind raced. If she didn't act, Thomas might not make it. She scanned the area, searching for anything, any leverage. The flickering light overhead flickered once more, casting erratic shadows that danced on the walls. Suddenly, from the corner of her eye, she saw movement. Another figure emerged, this one even more ominous than the last. It was gaunt, with skin stretched too tightly over its bones, eyes reflecting a predatory hunger. It slid into the light like oil, oozing toward them. "Thomas!" Clara screamed, fear clawing at her throat. Before he could turn, the gaunt figure lunged at him, but she was quicker this time. She grabbed a heavy candlestick from the nearby table, the cold metal grounding her fraying nerves. The moment felt suspended time stilled before the descent into madness. Gripping the candlestick tightly, she rushed forward. With a primal scream, she swung it, connecting with the side of the gaunt creature's head. It staggered back, letting out a shrill cry. But it wasn't enough to deter it. Its eyes glinted menacingly, and it lunged again. Thomas regained his footing and came to her side, visibly shaken but unyielding. "What are you doing?" "Fighting," she replied breathlessly, determination surging. Together, they faced the two figures, a creature of muscle and shadow against a backdrop of flickering light and uncertainty. Each clash of fists, and the sharp metallic ring of the candlestick resonated in the thick, stagnant air. Then, Clara caught a glimpse of something through the corner of her eye, another shadow creeping closer. It wasn't just a battle of monsters. It was a fight against an impending tide. A tide that threatened to drown them both. "There's more!" she panted, the cold sweat of realization trickling down her spine. As the growls mingled into a chorus of malice, Clara felt desperation rising, threatening to overwhelm her. What lay ahead? Would they have the strength to face these horrors together? What other secrets lingered in the shadows of this cursed mansion? A scream broke through the chaos, a chilling sound echoing their darkest fears. What awaited them was far worse than they could ever imagine. The growls morphed into a cacophony. Shadows leaped from every corner, revealing more twisted, grotesque figures. The cemetery of silence had been shattered, replaced by frantic yells, grunts, and the sickening sound of bodies colliding. Clara's heart hammered in her chest. Every instinct screamed for her to run, to escape this nightmare. But she couldn't leave Thomas. Not now. Not when he needed her. "Clara!" Thomas cried, as another figure lunged from the darkness, a hulking mass of sinewy muscle and gnarled teeth. They were cornered, the walls seemed to close in around them like the jaws of a beast. She swung the candlestick once more, feeling its weight sink into the creature's side. The blow landed, but it merely seemed to fuel its rage. It howled, an inhuman sound that reverberated through the very bones of the mansion. "Let us back up," Thomas urged, inching backward as he kept his eyes on the advancing monsters. "We need to regroup." "Regroup?" The panic in her voice was palpable. "Where?" "There's nowhere to go." With no other options left, they retreated toward the grand staircase. Clara dashed up the steps, gripping onto the banister for support. Yet, the growls followed them, echoing like a dark symphony. "Keep going!" Thomas shouted, his voice strained as he followed close behind. But Clara's breath hitched as they reached the landing. The shadows on the walls multiplied, writhing towards them. Suddenly, the lights flickered, plunging them into darkness. Fear seized her. In that suffocating void, she felt the harsh grip of uncertainty. The figures were now mere whispers lurking just beyond her reach. "Clara, are you okay?" Thomas's voice was a lifeline in the chaos. "Yes," she breathed, though the tremor in her hands told a different story. They pressed onward into a hallway, its familiar edges blurred in the shadows. Clara felt a shiver crawl up her spine. Was it the cold air, or the realization of where they were heading? It was a danger they had faced countless times, the threshold outside the master bedroom. Thomas glanced at her, his eyes glimmering with a mixture of fear and hope. "This way." He ushered her into the room, slamming the door behind them. But the moment felt fragile, hanging by the thinnest thread. Clara turned quickly, pressing her back against the door, feeling the cool wood against her skin. The creatures outside howled in frustration, shaking the door as if eager to break through the barrier. "Shouldn't we barricade it?" she whispered, breathless. "Too late for that," Thomas replied, his tone urgent as he scanned the room. "We need to find something they can't break." He sprinted towards the wardrobe, flinging open the doors. Clara glanced around, searching for anything they could use. Her mind raced, the adrenaline flooding through her veins. She felt alive but exposed, like a rabbit caught in the eye of a predatory hawk. "Clara!" Thomas shouted, dragging heavy furniture toward the door. "Help me!" The split-second distraction of hope flickered. Together, they pushed a chest of drawers up against the door. It wouldn't hold forever, but it was a moment to catch their breaths. But then, from deep within the shadows, a voice emerged. It was low and grating, slithering through the cracks in their defenses. "Come out, little mice. We only want to play." The whisper sent chills racing down Clara's spine. "Who are you?" she demanded, though her voice trembled. "Your worst nightmare," it hissed. "Come join us." A splintering crack echoed through the room as a claw jabbed at the door, splintering the wood. Clara froze. "Get ready," Thomas urged. "Whatever it is, we face it together." They braced themselves, hearts pounding like war drums. Shadows twisted, claws scratched at the door, and then a faint light flickered from the corner of the room. "What is happening?" Clara asked, sensing that something was shifting beyond their fragile barricade. As the door began to bend, something began to crawl out from the corners of the room. A glimmer of truth, something unearthly. Was it salvation or damnation? "This can't be happening!" she screamed. Thomas's expression turned to one of dread. They were about to face the darkness in its truest form, but beyond the fearful cascades of shadows, there was a light growing brighter by the second, a presence that promised answers. What had they unleashed in that haunted realm? What awaited them as the door crumbled further? The doors shuddered violently, splintering under the relentless force from beyond. Clara pressed her palms against the wood, the beat of her heart echoing like a thunderous drum. "I can't do this, Thomas." She could barely think through the haze of panic. Shadows swept closer, drawing nearer, whispering secrets she never wanted to hear. But Thomas didn't waver. "We'll make it! I promise!" he insisted, his voice tight with resolve. A blinding light surged from the room's corner, casting ethereal rays that snaked around the grotesque figures. It flickered just above the floor, illuminating what looked like symbols engraved in the wood. Clara squinted to focus on the shimmering patterns, drawing energy as if they were alive. "Look!" Thomas shouted, pointing. "It's a sigil. Maybe we can use it." Clara took a hesitant step toward the light. The shadows recoiled, their howls turning into screeches of fury as if they sensed what she was trying to do. The air thickened, desperation clawed at her insides. "What do we do?" "Touch it," he urged, eyes wide with hope. "It might be our way out." Drawing a deep breath, she hesitated only for a moment before lunging forward, her fingers brushing against the light. A shockwave of warmth enveloped her, igniting her insides. "Whoa!" Thomas gasped, stumbling back. The room exploded into brilliance as if the sun had broken through the night. Shadows writhed and twisted in agony, sinking back deeper into the corners. Clara felt a surge of power course through her, fueling her strength. "I think it's working!" she cried out, her fear transforming into adrenaline. But then, as if the light had given birth to even more horrors, a new figure emerged from the depths of darkness, a silhouette rising tall, malevolent, and overwhelming. A chilling, blaring laugh unfurled as it stepped into the light's edges. "You think you can escape me?" A chill crawled through her skin as recognition flickered in her mind. This was no mere beast, it was the embodiment of every dark desire, every fear, standing before them, shrouded in shadows like a king amongst paupers. "Step back, Clara!" Thomas shouted, brandishing a broken shard of furniture he had seized, the trembling in his body only barely hidden. "We'll fight together." "No!" The dark figure scoffed, its voice smooth like oil. "You're already beaten. You were never meant to find this sanctuary." Clara's heart raced. "Sanctuary?" she echoed, desperately seeking clarity amidst the chaos. "What do you mean?" "Your connection to the light strengthens my power," it hissed, its form shifting as if the shadows themselves were bending to its will. "Together, we shall unleash what has been dormant far too long." Thomas, growing desperate, lunged forward, the shard aiming for the dark figure. "Get away from her!" But Clara, drawn inexplicably toward the light, stood firm. "No! Stop!" She was torn between the desire to protect Thomas and the urgency to explore this newfound power. The legends Flynn had told her about the magic hidden within the mansion swirled in her mind. The room trembled, and the shadows came back with a vengeance, vibrating on the cusp of breaking through their light. Clara felt pulled in two directions, one towards the shadowy figure that promised power, the other to the light that represented safety. "Clara!" Thomas yelled, eyes wide in panic. "Don't listen to it! It's lying!" As the walls quaked and the shadows lunged for them once more, Clara's mind blitzed with visions of escape or power. I don't know what to choose." The figure surged forward, claws slicing through the air. "Choose before it's too late." As the dark threat loomed, Clara faced a choice that could shatter their destinies or bind them forever. What side would she choose? The light flickered dimly, threatening to extinguish. Would the power devour her? Would she save Thomas or doom them both? Their time was almost up. The shadows were penalizing the delay with another surge. "Clara!" Thomas cried desperately. She had to decide. Was it power at the cost of her soul, or the light that could save them all? In that heartbeat, choices were forged, destinies teetered, and the ever-looming darkness pressed in. What would rise from Clara's decision, and what would be left in the wake of its revelation? The air crackled with tension as Clara's heart thudded in her chest. Light flickered like a dying star, casting jagged shadows that danced hungrily around them. Thomas's voice pierced through the chaos, filled with panic and determination. "Clara! You have to trust me. Stand with the light." But the malignant figure before them pulsed with an eerie allure, its dark features twisting into a malevolent smile. "Foolish boy," it jeered, eyes glinting with wicked mischief. "You could never comprehend the depth of her power. I can offer her freedom, strength." Clara reeled, grappling with the choice. She felt the power of the light thrumming beneath her fingertips, a warmth akin to the embrace of a loved one. But the figure's seductive whisper tempted her with promises of immeasurable strength, a force capable of overcoming all her fears. What if I could be more than just a maid trapped in an ancient mansion? "No! Clara!" Thomas shouted, urgency lacing his voice. "You're not meant to wield that kind of darkness." In a split second, the shadows lunged, hungry and fierce. Clara's breath hitched as she felt the cold rush of despair wash over her. She glimpsed flashes of her life haunted by a past she always tried to escape, whispers of failure, echoes of a life much less than she dreamed of. The malevolence surged forward, and with a quick motion, it halted inches from her face. It breathed softly, "All you have to do is embrace me, and every fear will vanish." "Don't do it!" Thomas's voice broke through, his shard of wood quaking in his grip. With trembling hands, Clara reached out, torn between dark temptation and the warmth of her bond with Thomas. I don't know what to do." The blaring laugh echoed again, sending shivers down her spine, as if the walls themselves were sneering at her uncertainty. The sigils on the ground began to pulse, starting to glow brighter as if sensing her internal battle, urging her to make a choice. Time stretched, and the shadows encircled her like a living tapestry. Clara inhaled deeply. Warmth poured from her fingers into the sigil, illuminating her fear and anger. She panicked, sensing the shadows pulling her in, threatening to consume her resolve. "I can't let it win! I can't!" In a gasp, she yelled, "No! You don't own me!" Her determination surged like a tidal wave, and she thrust her hand deeper into the light. The energy exploded, exploding outward with a searing brightness that momentarily blinded everything in the room. She heard Thomas scream her name, almost drowning in the vibrant resonance of her choice. But something unexpected happened. Where the darkness had once been unyielding, it flickered, hesitated. As uncertainty seeped into the figure's malevolence, Clara felt a pull of warmth thread through her, urging her to concentrate, to push back. "You don't control me! You don't own my power!" The shadows screamed, lashing out in fury. The walls groaned as if trying to contain the chaos inside. Clara felt a rush of exhilaration, as if her heartbeat synced with the rhythm of the universe, her gaze unwavering. "Yes!" Thomas shouted, steadiness returning to his voice. "That's it, Clara! Fight!" They were no longer alone in their battle. The light pulsed with every ounce of her will, dancing wildly, challenging the encroaching darkness. Clara's soul ignited as she realized, this wasn't just about saving herself, this was about reclaiming who she was meant to be. But just as the tide seemed to shift in their favor, the dark figure shrieked, "You think this is over? You have unleashed something far worse than you could imagine." The shadows morphed, twisting, squirming as they fled from the brilliance. But a sense of dread coiled in Clara's gut. A new threat loomed, just beyond sight, tailing the darkness. "Clara!" She heard Thomas yell again, but his voice faded beneath the relentless howl of impending catastrophe. "What have I done?" As the last remnants of shadow withdrew, her surroundings began to shift. New nightmares unfurled, stretching into an uncharted terror, leaving Clara standing on the precipice of an unknown world. Darkness wove through the once safe sanctuary they had thought they controlled. A shiver traced her spine. Had she merely disrupted a larger scheme? And as Clara clutched the sigil, the question loomed ominously, what had she truly unleashed? A chill enveloped Clara as the shadows thinned, revealing a twisted landscape where the familiar warmth of the light began to flicker uneasily. It felt as if she had torn a page from a story best left unread. The ground beneath her cracked like a fragile egg, and a low rumble echoed through the room, reverberating against her bones. "Clara!" Thomas's voice broke through the disturbances, urgency spiking in its tone. "Stay close. We have to find a way out of here." She looked back at him, fear tightening her chest. His eyes were wide, but they held a glimmer of unwavering faith. It steeled her resolve. Yet the darkness clung like an unwelcome veil, coaxing her to bend it to her will. She could feel the pull, like a siren song beckoning her to plunge into an abyss of power and darkness. But she couldn't forget the truth that flooded her heart just moments ago. This was her choice, and she would not let it become her chain. Suddenly, the whispers returned, lacing the air thick with malice. "Embrace your potential, Clara. You know you want this." The voice twisted with allure, promising untold secrets and gothic grandeur, enticing her with what she could become. "No!" she shouted, the word launching from her throat with fierce defiance. "I am not yours!" Her declaration sent ripples through the shadows, momentarily stunning them. The mockery faded, replaced by an unsettling silence that fell over the room like a heavy shroud. "Clara, we need to concentrate." Thomas's voice grounded her, urging her to remember why they were fighting. He darted to her side, gripping her wrist tightly, and for a fleeting moment, the connection between them glowed with brilliance, a shared ember of hope. But before they could plot their next move, the floor erupted around them, splitting wide with a roar. Clara stumbled back, her heart racing as jagged cracks spider-webbed outward, revealing a chaotic realm beneath, teeming with roiling smoke and undulating shadows. They were now standing at the threshold of another world, one that unraveled like a nightmare, a menagerie of horrors and wraiths just waiting to spring. "What is this place?" Clara gasped, eyes wide with the realization of their peril. "It's the realm of your unleashed shadows, you let it out." Thomas's voice dropped to a whisper, as if saying it louder would draw the malevolence closer. Behind her, remnants of the dark figure loomed, its form flickering in and out like an old projection, an apparition of ill intent caught between dimensions. "You cannot escape, Clara," it hissed. "What is unleashed must fulfill its purpose. You are the key." Panic gripped her as she stepped backward, bumping into Thomas, who stood rigid, his eyes scanning the environment, ready for an attack. "We need to form a plan," he muttered fiercely. "If one shadow splits, others will follow. Then we must not let them latch on to us. This is our time to fight back." Her resolve solidified once more, fueled by the memories of her past of being unseen, unheard, and now transformed by her own strength. Clara extended her hand toward the unveiled shadows, channeling the energy of the sigil. "You don't belong here," she yelled, her voice echoing with newfound authority. Light surged from her palms, radiating against the encroaching darkness. It met the shadows with a crackle, pushing back the curl of despair trying to wrap around her mind. But just as she felt momentum shift once more, an ear-splitting shriek tore through the air, slicing opposed to the light. The dark figure recoiled, its form wavering, and then it began to morph into a grotesque version of herself, amplifying her darkest fears and failures. No! Clara stumbled back, but it was too late. The images surrounded her, echoing memories she thought she had buried deep. Face yourself, Clara. You can't hide from what you've unleashed. And in that moment of vulnerability, she felt the very essence of her being teetering. But still, a flicker of hope sparked in her chest. If she could see it, acknowledge it, perhaps she could reshape it. Thomas, we need to. But before she could finish, the world around them crackled once more, sending both of them sprawling as shadows spiraled in, promising doom and destruction. Clara, you have to stand strong. And in the throbbing chaos, Clara found the strength she didn't know she had, pulling together all her courage to confront what had emerged. The undeniable truth stared back at her, and she realized that only by facing it could she hope to reclaim not just her power but her soul. As the shadows closed in, a terrible choice loomed ahead. Could Clara bridge the space between light and darkness, or would she be consumed in the escalating storm? The only certainty she held was that change was coming, one way or another. What would it cost to confront her own dark reflection? The shrieking shadows closed in, their chill wrapping around Clara like a vice. She could barely breathe under the weight of her own darkness, the grotesque version of herself sneering, its eyes filled with disdain. You think you can fight me? I am you, your insecurities, your failures? You can't escape. Clara's heart thundered in her chest. Doubt crept in like smoke, blurring her vision. But through the haze, she saw Thomas's fierce stare. He was unyielding, determined. Clara! Focus! You hold the power! The ground trembled again, the specters thrumming with malevolent energy. Shadows whirled, clawing for any piece of her resolve, but she remembered that glimmer of hope they had shared. It anchored her against the rising tide of despair. With a hoarse breath, Clara shouted, I want to be a prisoner of my past. She thrust her hands forward again, the sigil pulsing with light. The brightness flared against the dark that cloaked her doppelganger, that reflection of shame. They clashed, light dancing defiantly, jagged edges of shadow biting at her resolve, the figure's features warped in rage. You cannot banish what is inside you. It will always remain. A low growl echoed around them, more shadows erupting from the cracks as if the floor were alive, churning with malice. The room distorted further, mirroring Clara's torn emotions. In that swirling chaos, her memories replayed a cacophony of self-doubt. Every moment she had let herself be diminished echoed as a haunting refrain. She tried to drown it out, but each shadow was a memory wearing its skin. The sting of isolation gripped her, sharp and unrelenting. Stop! She cried, fighting to silence the dissonance. You are not my truth! As she said the words, she felt the sigil hum, the light pushing back, the shadows pulsating and faltering momentarily. Thomas moved next to her, his determination a steady presence against the tide of terror. Together, Clara! We must fight it together! The world around them shook violently, darkness swirling like a storm, shadows merging, creating monstrous amalgamations. Clara felt a surge of energy welling up from within her. It ignited a fire in her core, a surge of self-belief mingled with their shared bond. I'm not alone! She shouted, and the sigil brightened, pouring light against the encroaching darkness. In that moment, everything focused. Her fears no longer overwhelmed her. They transformed into a compass, guiding her forward. Shapes of dread lunged, but she held firm, embracing each shadow with clarity rather than fear. You are a part of me, but not all of me. The words erupted from her, and in response, the darkness wailed, weakening, attacking itself as if torn apart by her invincible light. The brink of reality wavered, Clara feeling a shift. She stepped forward, fueled by raw emotion, and as she did, sparks flew. A cascade of illumination danced through the room, illuminating faces of old, or rather, past versions of herself, mistakes, shame, and vulnerabilities. You will not control me! She thundered, and it wasn't just a proclamation but a declaration of power, her voice resolute, carrying her hopes straight into the heart of the dark figure that had taken root within her. The shadows recoiled, contorting in agony. No! You cannot deny me! It shrieked, faltering, its grotesque form staggering backward. "Be gone!" Clara willed the light forward, a blinding force that swallowed the shadows whole, illuminating the room in dazzling brightness. The air shimmered, echoes of despair dissipating in the onslaught of her newfound strength, yet the remnants of darkness lingered, pulsating, pulling as if holding on to their last whisper of power. The ground shook violently beneath them once more, and Clara's breath hitched. Was it over? "Clara," Thomas's voice broke through the haze, filled with urgency. "Look out!" A shadow surged back, rushing forward, desperate for one last grasp. Without warning, Clara felt it, an icy hand brushing against her ankle, dragging her back toward the abyss from which she had fought so bravely to escape. "No!" she gasped, her heart racing, fighting against it as it pulled her closer, her veins chilling with panic. "Clara!" Thomas lunged to grab her, but instantly, he found himself slipping into darkness too, shadows swirling around him, making him helpless to stop her descent. "Together!" he yelled, reaching out. And in that moment, Clara saw the stark choice unfold before her. Would she let the shadows reclaim her, or would she draw upon their torment to forge her own destiny? The question hung heavy in the air, propelling her into a choice that would define everything to come. Which path would lead to her freedom? Would she grasp Thomas's hand, or let the darkness devour them both? Her next move could change it all. But clarity brought no peace. What would she choose when faced with the abyss that had always lurked? The ground trembled, and with it, uncertainty loomed. Clara stood at the brink, time suspended as the shadows clawed at her heels. Panic gripped her heart. Every instinct told her to flee, yet for once, the weight of a decision bore down on her like a suffocating blanket. She could feel Thomas's despair beside her, could hear the urgency in his voice, but the shadows whispered lies, promising an irresistible escape into power. "Clara! Don't let it take you!" Thomas's outstretched hand rekindled the bond between them, igniting a flicker of resolve. With nothing but adrenaline surging through her veins, she took a staggering step forward, pulling away from the icy grasp of darkness. "No! I have the choice!" Clara shouted, the words bursting from her lips, a fierce declaration of independence. The room shook violently, yet she stood her ground. The shadows swirling around her began to pulse, writhing in pain as if her declaration had struck a chord deep within them. Clara realized that darkness couldn't hold her captive unless she allowed it to. She took a breath, drawing in the light that surrounded them. It filled her with luminous strength, overpowering the echo of despair that had once enveloped her tightly. Thomas's hand was still extended. She could see the determination etched in his features. It mirrored her own newfound courage. The battle was more than physical, it was a war of wills. Clara's heartbeat synchronized with Thomas's resolve. Together, she whispered, more to herself than him. With everything they had, they launched toward the edge of the abyss. Clara grasped his hand firmly. The warmth of their connection surged through her, illuminating the dark recesses of doubt that had been clouding her mind. The figure of darkness howled in fury, its chilling voice echoing through the room. Clara felt the unsettling pull of fear take a step back as she shouted defiantly, "We choose light. We choose hope." The sigil beneath them blazed with intensity, the patterns vibrating in harmony with their cries. Light erupted, cascading over them in a torrent of warmth that began to swallow the shadows whole. "Clara! Now!" Thomas cried, his voice filled with an urgency that propelled her forward, wrapping her arms around his shoulders as they tumbled into the blinding light. For a heartbeat, everything felt suspended in time as she embraced the light, the waves of hope washing over them like a tide pushing back the darkness. They surged forward, past the swirling abyss where dread lingered. The blinding brilliance cut through all shadows, flinging Clara and Thomas into a moment of clarity that felt like forgiveness. It enveloped them, the darkness writhed in angry protest before fading like mist in the sun. With a final cry, the darkness dissipated, swallowed whole by the radiant light, leaving behind only an echo, a whisper of defeat. Clara found herself emerging into a realm shimmering with possibilities. At her feet lay remnants of the shadows, curling in the corner as they shrank away from the powerful presence she had summoned. She turned toward Thomas, and their eyes met, a mix of disbelief and triumph shining in their depths. They were alive. Somehow, they had done it together. What just happened? Clara breathed, her chest heaving from the exhilaration. Thomas stepped back, pulling her into a tight embrace. You found your strength. You faced it, Clara. You weren't afraid to embrace it, all the light and the dark within you. That's your power. As their laughter mixed with gasping breaths, the weight of the night's events began to lift. They had reclaimed not just their lives but their identities forged in the heat of chaos. Clara felt free. But in the distance, a rustle of the night air caught her attention. What now? She wondered aloud, stepping back from the moment of release they shared. Now we rebuild, Thomas said with determination in his voice, a touch of softness in his eyes. Together, we can turn this mansion into something beautiful, a sanctuary, not just for us, but for others who've lost their way. Clara smiled back, ready to face whatever lay ahead. I've always wanted to dance. As morning light warmed the horizon, they stood not just as a maid and a billionaire, but as allies, as architects of a future filled with boundless potential. She felt like she could finally breathe, ready to light up the world with her choices, her laughter no longer stifled by the darkness of the past. They shared a look that conveyed everything words could never express. Together, they would withstand anything life threw at them. The shadows were no more. The darkness had taught them how to shine brighter together. Together, they stepped forward into the dawn, free of the chains that had once bound them. You need to subscribe now, so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. This is the moment to show your support. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about this epic conclusion. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this amazing ending. Let us keep this community growing strong.